Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to take a look at another three of these very cool Zuru Toys Dino Strike Hunt figures. I recently reviewed the very first three, which was the Tyrannosaurus, the Amargasaurus, and the Stegosaurus. Well, we now have the other three that are included in the line, which would be the Brachiosaurus, the Pterosaur as they call it, which I would believe is a Tapejara, and then the Dilophosaurus. So really cool species that they've chosen for these newest figures. And there is actually one other release. It's another version of the Tyrannosaur. It's apparently a rare version with an alternate color scheme, but since I've already reviewed the other Tyrannosaurus, I don't necessarily need to review the rare version of the Tyrannosaurus. I also haven't found it quite yet, but if I do find it, who knows, maybe I will review it. But at this point, I'm really only interested in checking out the newest sculpts from this line, so let's go ahead, get a closer look at each of these figures right now. So of course we're not going to go into any type of like an insane amount of detail on the figures. We're just going to kind of go over them a little bit here, but if we were to go very thoroughly into detail on each figure, we'd be here all day, and I don't want the reviews to go too long. But this one, of course, is the Brachiosaurus, and you can see he looks very angry. Straight away, he has a very miserable appearance to him, and that is actually because there is a bear trap, or a dino trap, that is attached to his leg. So it makes complete sense that he would be very distressed and look very unhappy right now. You can see the eyes are painted with a yellow, given a red pupil, and they're darkened around the eye with a nice dark purple. And just like I was stating in the reviews of the original three, the very first three that we looked at from this line, I'm loving the fact that Zuru has added so much more paintwork onto the figures. Like, there's not a ton more, but definitely more paintwork in comparison to what we had seen on the older figures, and I really think it pays off in the overall grand scheme of things as far as the overall appearance to the figures. It looks so much better with the extra paintwork on them. You can see the mouth is wide open. The teeth are painted. They're very nice and small, but they're actually quite carefully painted, so they look pretty darn nice overall. You can see the tongue is included in the mouth as well, but it is not painted, unfortunately. As we start to move back into the neck, you can continue to see the very nice detailing aspect of the figure. Lots and lots of skin wrinkles, especially when you look at the movement that's occurring in the neck of the dinosaur currently. There's like a lot of bending going on, so you would expect to see a lot of wrinkling in the skin. And that is actually shown quite nicely throughout the sculpt of this figure. The paintwork is a little inconsistent, as you can see that the white isn't quite as abundant here as it is on the upper part of the neck, but it still looks pretty good, even if the paintwork isn't perfectly applied as far as that goes. You can see some seams here because, of course, you have to connect the pieces to each other to actually build your dinosaur when you initially get it out of the kind of egg-like container that it is in. And then once we move down here a little bit further, you can see some of these slits in the neck, which is something that we've seen throughout all of the figures so far. You can also see that it is given a very nice bloody red coloration, as well as a bit of a gloss coat to sort of insinuate that bloody shine. And I like the fact that, again, the wounds are actually sculpted into the body. It's not just paint applied to the figure, and that's exactly the same thing that we see on this Brachiosaurus. And then once you move down into the body, you can see some really nice texturing to the skin, beautifully sculpted out skin detail on the Brachiosaurus, as well as lots of musculature to the legs. Again, being a sauropod, you would expect it to be very muscular, and that is exactly what we see here throughout the entire sculpt of the sauropod here, the Brachiosaurus. You can also see that the nails are painted with a very nice black coloration, similar to what all of the figures seem to have. They all have that black nail paint, which is a huge plus. I love the inclusion of the nail paint. We see another wound on the rear leg here, another reddish slit right across the thigh region of our Brachiosaurus. As we continue to move back here into the tail detail looks really good as well. Very nicely textured appearance to the skin here on the tail of the Brachiosaurus. You can also kind of make out the spinal column that runs along the back. And then once we look here over at this side, you can see some more wounds. Of course, the detailing aspect of the neck region, lots of creases and everything look really good, but we pretty much have the same style detail over here that we had seen on the previous side. But you can see some more wounds on this side. This time we have one right here in the neck region, and then we have one up in the shoulder area with kind of like an X-like slit, and then we have another one back here on the thigh. So very cool on the part of Zuru Toys to include things like this, because again, if you're trying to capture dinosaurs, I'm certain that they're probably going to get wounded trying to escape and stuff. So that's a very nice touch on the part of the Dino Strike line, and you can see that this side the leg is lifting up off of the ground as opposed to being planted like we see on the previous side, and that is also, I think, because of the fact that we have this very cool kind of a bear trap that's included, or a dino trap you could call it now, and then you can kind of apply it to that leg so it looks like now the dinosaur is yelling, it's injured, and it has that kind of hanging off of it. It doesn't stay on very well, though, I will say that. It just kind of falls off, so it's not something that you can really pick the figure up and play with it hanging on, as it just tends to kind of fall right back off. But if you are just positioning the dinosaur to kind of display it, you can definitely include that quite nicely. But you can see that primarily the paint of the dinosaur is just a purple, and then we have like orange that runs along the back, and then a lighter underbelly, kind of like an off-white down here, a creamy color. But a very cool Brachiosaurus nonetheless. Then we have our Pterosaur, and the Pterosaur is really cool. Again, what I would imagine is maybe their attempt at a tapejara, but it's really cool looking as far as the sculpting aspect goes, and you can see that it does have an articulated jaw, which looks really nice. The eye is painted yet again with a yellow and given a red pupil, similar to the way that the fingernails are all painted with a black. All of the same colors are pretty much used on the eyes of all of the different figures. You can see, however, that the inside of the mouth actually sports the tongue painted out here on the tapejara, the Pterosaur, which is a really, really cool addition to the figure. And yet again, detail-wise, the head sculpt is beautifully done. There is a lot of really nice, very fine detailing included on these figures, especially up in the crest of the Pterosaur, and then coming down into the neck, you can see lots of kind of skin wrinkling, skin creasing going on in the neck region of the Pterosaur as well. Coming down into the lower part of the body, you can see some more beautiful detail, as well as a nice lighter coloration. Primarily, the Pterosaur is mostly a blue, but then here in the stomach region, the neck region and stuff, you have like this off-white, which looks really quite nice. Once you lead out here into the wings, you can see that the actual skin flaps of the wings are really, really nicely sculpted, beautifully detailed. You can see the fingernails right there, up there on the hand, out on the wing, and you can see that again we have that black nail paint. You can also see a few tears in the wing here, so continuing on with the appearance of like injuries and stuff. And then when we come over to this side, you can again see more tears here, some more tears there, and just generally some absolutely beautiful looking detailing in the wing department. The legs as well sport the very nicely sculpted out and painted nails with that black coloration. The Pterosaur definitely has yet again another very distressed type of a look to it, I would say. So that's very common as far as these figures go, but continue on with the theme of things. And then looking up here at the upper side of the Pterosaur, you could see that it has that very nice bluish coloration and then that beautiful orange, and it plays off of each other so well. Again, the figures are very bright as far as the coloration goes, very vibrant, but I feel like that's kind of what they were going for as far as the colors. They want them to really stand out and shine, and they do a great job as far as that goes. You can see that that orange coloration runs right down the back of the Pterosaur as well, and then up here on the other wing, and you can again see some more of those slits. This is the first one of these figures, though, that doesn't actually have like blood included, so for the most part, the Pterosaur, I feel like, has been doing a pretty good job of not getting too injured, aside from some slits in the wings. But again, the detailing aspect is incredibly nice up here on the top of the wings as well, and then we also have kind of like some chains that are attached to the legs of the Pterosaur, and that is, I guess, their attempt at catching this poor Pterosaur and taking him to wherever they are taking the poor thing and doing whatever it is that they intend on doing to it. I don't know, maybe turning it into a battle dinosaur like they did with the first couple waves of these. And then we have the Dilophosaurus. This is the one that was a little bit harder to find for me, but it's the one that I was the most excited about, I think, because it looks really cool. And once we take the capture gear off, you can see that the head sculpt looks really, really nice. Obviously sporting a very Jurassic Park inspired look, especially considering the fact that we have a frill right there, which is something we know Dilophosaurus obviously did not have. So clearly Zuru took some inspiration from Jurassic Park with the figure right here, but you can see that the head sculpt looks really quite nice. You have the nostrils sculpted out up there. Of course, the eyes painted with a yellow and a red pupil yet again. Primarily the body is like this nice greenish coloration, but you have kind of like this sort of like a light orangish coloration that runs the course of the outer rim of the frill as well as up on the crest. So it gives it some really nice color variation. Yet again, we have an articulated jaw, but of course it's actually operated by the tail. It's not like the Tyrannosaurus where you can just open it, or at least mine could. This one I actually have to hold the tail down to look inside the mouth, but you can see the teeth are painted really nicely yet again, and this one actually has both the teeth painted and the tongue, which is a plus because I think, again, the inside of the mouth looks way better once everything is painted as opposed to just like choosing the tongue or the teeth. This one has everything painted in there, and all of it looks to be painted really quite nicely. No sloppiness or anything as far as that goes. Beautiful paintwork on this figure. As we move back into the neck of the dinosaur, you can see that the skin texture looks great on this one as well. You can also see that the texturing there on the back of the frill also looks quite nice. You have some ridges that run along the spinal column of the Dilophosaurus, and then that orangish coloration picks up again down here. I'm kind of sad that it didn't run down the course of the neck here on the back, but at the same time, it still looks pretty cool. But I just would have preferred it to run down the entire course of the neck as well. But once we come down into the body, you can see the arms are very nicely done, very nicely kind of like held into the body a little bit, and then you can see the nails are painted with that black, just like we had seen pretty much every single time with these figures. You could see some more open wounds yet again. You have a kind of like an X-like wound in the stomach region, 2 slits in the thigh, and then a slit back there on the tail. Very nicely sculpted out leg, sporting some pretty nice musculature, as well as a beautifully sculpted foot with some nice scoots down the toes, and again the black nails like we've seen every single time, and then a very nice curve in the tail. Very nice paint application with some nice smooth transitions between that green to the lighter underbelly there. You can see the detailing here on the underside looks quite nice as well. And then if we take a look at the opposing side, we don't see too much on this side as far as the neck region because the frill's kind of in the way right there. But again, some more injuries have occurred to the Dilophosaurus as you have a slit on the tail and 2 slits in the thigh. Again, nicely painted nails are just perfectly painted. The paintwork is actually really well done on most of these figures, if not all of them, and you can see that really nicely here on this Dilophosaurus. So another absolutely awesome figure. I'm really loving the newer Dino Strike figures, as these are so much better than the previous ones, which the previous ones were pretty darn good as well, but I really quite like these newer ones a lot more. Of course, we have action features like we had with the first couple. The Pterosaur, we pull the legs together, which causes the head to go down. So if like the mouth were open, it would now appear as though, if it would stand still a little bit, it would now appear as though the head is kind of striking at whatever, is trying to capture it. And the chains there flex quite nicely, which allows you to pull off the action feature even with the kind of capture gear on. The Brachiosaurus has the same style of action feature as the Amargasaurus, where you push the tail down, causes the head to strike, or the head down, which causes the tail to strike. So that's really your choice. And then the Dilophosaurus, we've already kind of had like a sneak peek of the action feature here. You just have to push the tail down, which causes the mouth to kind of snap and bite at whatever it is exactly that you are trying to have your Dilophosaurus attack. And then, of course, they all have their individual capture gear, which the Pterosaur includes the chains there on the leg. The Brachiosaurus, of course, has the bear trap or dinosaur trap. And then the Dilophosaurus has capture gear on the head, which kind of goes upside down right there so that you can keep your dinosaur from biting you. Really, really awesome stuff. As far as the size goes, for a length on the Dilophosaurus, you were looking at about 5 3/4 inches, closing in on 6 inches, or about 14.5 centimeters. And then for a height, the highest point would be that frill. You're looking at about a little under 3 3/4 inches, or 9.5 centimeters. And then for the Brachiosaurus, for a length from the tip of the tail to the head there, I just knocked the Dilophosaurus over a little bit, but you were looking at about 6 3/4 inches, or about 17 centimeters, closing in on 17.5. Now I knocked the Brachiosaurus over. And then for a height, the highest point is the neck, a little under 3.5 inches, or about 8.5 centimeters. And then for our Pterosaur, who's a little harder to kind of measure because he doesn't stand or anything with the capture gear on there. For a length as far as the wingspan, you were looking at about 8 inches or 20 centimeters. And then if it's kind of balancing on the chains right there, height-wise about almost 3 3/4 inches, between 3.5 and 3 3/4 inches, or about 9.5 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Dilophosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line next to our newest variants of the Dino Strike line, the Hunt versions, and you can definitely see again that these figures do sport a pretty good size. I would say probably like small approaching a medium size range, which is a bit larger than what we had seen on the previous line of Dino Strike figures. And for another comparison, here are all of the Dino Strike Hunt figures next to each other, again showing you that as far as like sizes and everything goes, there is no accuracy in that department. They're all just kind of the same similar size range, but they all look incredibly cool next to each other for sure. So these very cool Dino Strike Hunt figures are awesome. Each and every one of them I am so sold on and cannot wait now for them to produce another round of figures, which unfortunately these are brand new, and the next round would be pretty far off, as again these are just fresh as far as release date goes. But I was pretty happy with the first couple that I got, so that kind of caused me to go crazy and continuously search for them until I found the others, and now I have again all of them except for the vehicles, which I don't really care about, and then the alternate coloration of the Rex, which I may try to get. I'm just not too sure yet, although I do really quite like the Rex. But regardless, these three here, the newest additions to my collection would be the Pterosaur, the Brachiosaurus, and the Dilophosaurus, all of which are awesome. I would say the weakest would probably be the Brachiosaurus, because he's just generally not that great, but still a pretty cool looking interpretation of a Brachiosaurus. They have very, very bright colors on these figures, as you can see with a purple and orange Brachiosaurus, but it still looks pretty neat as far as the coloration goes. Makes the figure stand out quite nicely, and overall the sculpt and detail is definitely very nicely done, and including the kind of bear trap is really cool as well, differentiating the capture gear from the others for sure. And then we have the Pterosaur, which also is really nicely done. Definitely one of my favorites, I would say, from the line. I think the sculpt is really cool looking on the figure, and they've done a great job in the detailing aspect, especially when you look at areas like the wings and the fine detailing in the wings. I absolutely love the sculpt and detail of this Pterosaur. They have a really cool action feature as well. I would have expected more of like a wing flapping action feature, but the striking action feature with the head is also quite nice and also makes sense as it's again being captured, so it would try to defend itself probably by biting and pecking whoever it is exactly that's trying to capture it. But the paintwork on this one is really beautiful as well, very flashy looking. They've done a great job of using orange a lot throughout this line, pretty much on all of the figures except for the Rex, which is very interesting that they've really been in love with the orangish coloration, but I think that the orange and blue play off of each other so well on this Pterosaur, just making the entire thing look so flashy and really, really neat looking. And then we have the Dilophosaurus, which is potentially my favorite of the entire line. It's a toss-up between the Dilophosaurus and the Rex, but I really like this Dilophosaurus. The sculpt is beautifully done, really nicely reminiscent of, again, a Jurassic Park-style Dilophosaurus, very highly detailed and beautifully painted with a few variations of green and an orange coloration. And I actually quite like the paint application on the Dilophosaurus because it's probably the closest out of all of them that I would consider maybe natural looking on the figure. The inclusion of the capture gear on the head gives me a very strong Kenner feel for the figure, and actually all of them have that very strong Kenner feel as far as like including capture gear on it. And then of course the inclusion of the wounds as well, actually being sculpted in as opposed to just being paint on a figure, was an added plus to the figures overall. So all of these, every single one of these Dino Strike Hunt figures are awesome and definite recommendations from me. So make sure you head to your local Target, pick up some of these incredibly awesome Dino Strike Hunt figures, and make sure you also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.